What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Marketing Seed Radio, episode 96. And let me ask you a question. Do you know what to include in your origin story? So let me just back up here a little bit. And I first got this question from inside the Magnetic Hero Facebook group from someone. And I was like, that is an awesome thing to talk about. And I'm going to kill two birds with one stone and talk about it on the podcast, as well as probably chunk this video in with a little behind the scenes into that group as well, and some bonuses, if you will. So can't give everything away out here after all. But do you want to know the one thing that every hero has? And this is when I first started learning this lesson. When I first started out online, I knew I had a vision. I had this vision that I was going to make happen no matter what. And I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a way to explain it. Like, I could see the way I wanted my personal game of life to be. I could see it in my head, but I could not explain it. I had no idea what to say. And the first time I got serious about making money online was whenever I was recovering from knee surgery. And I had found myself in a game, playing a game that had been completely changed and just left broken. And that game was my life. And despite having the best intentions to keep helping people at this time, I was actually hurting them. And I was hurting them because I was desperate. You know, I was desperate to save them and save them from an unhealthy existence, to save them from what I had done to myself. And so I would get on Twitch and I'd be spewing all this information. It's like, I'm going to logically explain everything that you got to do to be healthy. I'm going to provide more value than anybody else while I'm down here, not unable to actually be the person that I had envisioned in my head. And I didn't know I was actually hurting them by doing that. And this is why it was even a little bit deeper. I was waiting for somebody to come and save me in my reality. And I was well aware of the mistakes I had made along the way, and I just flat wouldn't forgive myself. I hated the past versions of myself. My decisions had left me in this broken state, and I was helpless in my own mind at this point. Like, it was really, really bad. So I had to come to terms with myself in a way that I never imagined possible. So as I streamed these video games on Twitch, I began to tell my story because, like, no matter what game you play, after a while, if you play too much of any one game, you'll get burned out and then you'll get bored and it'll just turn stale. And so I started telling my stories. Like, I stopped teaching because no one was listening. No one was listening anyway. So I stopped teaching and I started telling my stories. And, I had hundreds of them, thousands of them maybe. And no one was listening yet still, but that's when the tide turned. That's when everything began to change. Whenever I started telling my stories, I began to realize by telling my stories to the world, and I was pretty much just sharing my adventure with them. I could choose to be the one with the hands on the controller playing the game of my own life. And the plan was pretty simple. I was going to just start doing the things that brought me fulfillment and connection. One of the things that has really resonated with me, and I've studied under and listened to some very smart people in this world, business owners, online marketers, people like that. And one of the biggest things that was ever explained to me was by Jim Edwards, and he said, act as if. Don't fake it till you make it. Act as if. So I started asking myself this question of, what would I do like $1 million later? What things would I be doing? The things that brought me fulfillment and brought me greater connection. So that's exactly what I started doing. And I was going to find new ways to grow and contribute. I was going to find ways to keep leveling up because I'm 100% addicted to that. And I was going to report every single thing I found along the way that I thought was significant in the most candid and truthful way I knew how to do. Was my my plan, because it takes quite a bit of time to develop your voice. You got to put in a lot of reps, a lot of fundamentals, but you can do all these things too. Like, you can not know what to talk about in your story. You can tell stories that aren't relevant, but at least probably you hadn't made the connection yet. Whenever I began telling these stories from the spot where I was like, this is important to me, and here's why. It's like, was it important to you? Yes, no, maybe. It didn't matter. I got it out there. And you can tell some stories that just don't make any sense at all. I've certainly done that along the way. Is like that, well, get done telling a story. It's like, well, that went nowhere. But after telling your stories time after time after time, you begin to realize what's actually important to you, the stuff that you keep talking about, the stuff you won't shut up about, where your playground is. So the question I would ask is, where is your playground? Where do you go to play? Not work. Where do you go to play? And talk about that. And then, even along the lines of writing this podcast, like, I realized that this was an origin story about finding your origin story. And this is the biggest lesson I learned along the way while trying to figure out what I should put in my origin story, what I wanted to put in my origin story. The only person who can save you is you. And the only person who can tell your story is you. So, heroes take charge of their own destiny. Start identifying. Say it with me here. I am a hero. There we go. So the only person that can save you is you. Tell your story. Tell about your playground. Just tell everything. And it eventually shapes up. So remember, guys, you are one upgrade away.